While Logitech should absolutely not take this as a challenge, I'm beginning to suspect that the company can't really make a bad keyboard. Whatever else a Logitech G keyboard offers, you can be sure that it's going to use high-quality Romer G mechanical switches, and the eminently user-friendly Logitech gaming software. That's certainly the case for the Logitech G513. The G513 is most similar in terms of price, functionality, and overall design, to the G810 Orion Spectrum. While the G513's sleek low-profile metal chassis improves upon its plain plasticine cousin, the lack of discrete media controls and the price hike are a little harder to swallow. Even so, the G513 represents another strong effort from Logitech's gaming branch, and the successful introduction of a linear key switch. A few tweaks would have made it nearly perfect, but I suspect that most gamers can live with a product that's merely excellent. Design. At 17.5 by 5.3 inches, 8.5 inches with the wrist rest, the G513 is one of the smaller full-size gaming keyboards I've ever reviewed. There's no wasted space on the metal chassis, which comes in either a stately dark gray or a vibrant silver. The keys are also elevated off of the chassis, rather than being embedded within it, which gives the whole peripheral a kind of minimalist and futuristic vibe. Keeping things so simple does have one major drawback: the G513 doesn't have discrete media keys. It's true that having dedicated keys is a luxury, but it's a luxury that you become used to fairly quickly. New to the mix are a USB pass-through and a plush wrist rest. The USB pass-through is located in the upper right corner of the keyboard, which makes it useful if you want to add a mouse there. The wrist rest feels comfortable, but because it's not attached to anything, it may shift around a bit during use. Switches? Logitech's Romer G switches are fixtures of the consumer gaming space by now. They're responsive, quiet and tactile keys that mimic the general look and feel of Cherry MX Browns. However, the G513 represents the first time Logitech has added an additional wrinkle to the Romer G mix. The linear Romer G is a little bit louder than a Cherry MX Red key, but it feels very similar. If you like pushing keycaps all the way down before a letter appears, the Romer G linear switch is probably the way to go. In terms of overall quality though, there's not much difference between the two. I tried both models and found that it really came down to individual preference. Features. Like almost every other Logitech G peripheral, the G513 runs on the Logitech gaming software. This lets you adjust the RGB illumination, reprogram the row of function buttons, and create profiles to link with individual games and programs. You can't reprogram every key, but the program is trivially simple to use. What I dislike. The G513 is an all-around solid mechanical keyboard, and I really haven't found much to dislike after a month of heavy use. Coming from a keyboard with a dedicated volume knob, makes adjusting volume and media playback a bit awkward. Likewise, there are no extra macro keys here to customize. These are both minor annoyances, solved by choosing a different keyboard suited to your playstyle, but it's something to keep in mind. Performance. Coming from the Logitech G19S, it did take me a couple of days to get used to the feel of the G513. The G19S is much larger and rather complex, while the G513 is on the simple, minimalistic side. Aside from the absence of all the fancy function keys, daily typing was comfortable. I found that I preferred the Romer G linear switches over the tactile, but this was merely a subjective feeling, and I can't really give you a good reason why. The differences are really subtle. It just comes down to what you like. As for noise, it is no secret that mechanical switches can be a bit clicky. The Romer G switches offer a nice balance of mechanical sound without getting on your nerves. I ran the G513 through tests with StarCraft, Final Fantasy XV, Overwatch, and Path of Exile, to see how it handled a wide variety of games. The keyboard performed well across the board, with no particular genres it favored or neglected. The only caveat I'd mention here is that the keyboard doesn't have any dedicated macro keys. If this is something you need for MMO play, you'll have to invest in a different model, such as the G613 or the G910. Bottom line. When you get right down to it, the G513 is a relatively simple keyboard. It introduces a new type of key switch, and it has RGB lighting, which jacks up the price a bit. Other than that, it's just well built and responsive, without any big surprises. That's okay, since that means there's also nothing to get in the way of its excellent performance. And while it lacks a few handy features found in other Logitech peripherals, it's ultimately not missing anything that detracts from its overall utility. For my money, the Logitech G810 is a better deal, but if you've got money to spare, and really dig the idea of a small metal chassis, the G513 is the way to go.